Hi, I wanted to do a video today about technique really, and this is how do you get your sound to be smooth and round, and also how do you get the speed when you're playing. There's really two things involved here. I mean, obviously one is your right hand, one's your left hand, but a lot of the speed actually comes from your right hand, and one of the most common problems I see with folks is that they get their hand kind of curled around like this. If I show you from the side, you can kind of see the way my fingers are sort of sticking out from the base this way. And sometimes that then leads you to use your fingertips and kind of pick at the strings. What we really want is to drop our hand back so that your fingers are sort of straighter like this, and then you wipe the strings. So with my right hand, instead of having it sort of curved around like that, it's going to just drop down. So what I normally ask people to do is just put your hand out and just let it hang, just relaxed. Now take that position exactly and move it onto the bass. Put your thumb on top of the pickup and then just let your fingers come down. Now on my particular bass, I'm actually resting this part here up on the back of the bass here, so that's really sitting down there. My thumb is just there and my hand is just resting out. Notice it's not curling around. Even when I'm moving down to the lower strings, I will still keep it like that. Now of course you alternate your fingers, and every time you hit a string you must end up on the string above it. Now you'll notice my fingers aren't really bending very much. There's a little bit of bend in there, but not a lot. It's certainly not this sort of thing. And you'll notice even when I'm trying to do this with my fingers all bent, I can't silence the other strings. So you've got to make sure that you keep your hand flat like that. You'll get a much smoother, rounder sound, plus you'll get a lot more speed. Now, the other hand, obviously the key with this sort of thing is to relax, which is easier to say than it is to do. Now, what I traditionally teach is that you leave one finger per fret, which is great practice, but when it comes time to play, and maybe you're playing for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it might be, you'll find that you can't hold your hand like that the whole time. Furthermore, when you move it right down here, down to this end of the bass, it gets pretty hard to keep your fingers out at one finger per fret. So you can relax them. But the one rule I would say when you're playing and you're doing your practice to make sure that you're not getting into a bad habit is make sure that your fingers aren't doing this. Don't let them close up. You've got to keep them a little bit separated all the time. The other thing to make sure is that you use all of your fingers. So you certainly don't want to start using, particularly this finger is one that a lot of people use. Don't start using it for all your moves. Try and at least be using your first finger and this one. Now, ideally, you want to be using all of your fingers, of course. And with the wrist position again, you know, sometimes I know when I show this, I over accentuate and I call it the broken wrist. You know, you can kind of see down here, it really is quite bent. Now you can relax it a bit, but one thing to do is to keep your elbow, keep that kind of tucked into your side. Now, of course, as you go further away, you're going to have to let it out, unless you've got really, really long forearms. So you are going to have to move it out. But as you come up here, I'm sort of about, on my bass, about the 5th fret. I've got it tucked into my side here. So, and again, with this hand, make sure you're using the pads of your fingers. If you find at the end of a session of playing that your fingertips are sore, then you're probably curving your fingers over too much, so you want them to be a little flatter on the strings. Now about the speed thing. The trick with the left hand to getting good speed and being able to play for a long time quickly, there's really two things. One is you need to be using all of your fingers. If you're using one finger or even just 2 fingers and you're sort of moving around like this, then you'll find that you can't play very quickly, because you actually, well, 2 things have to happen. One is you have to keep looking to move. The other thing that happens is that you've got to move your hand. It's big big jumps, and every time you do those jumps, you lose a lot of time, a lot of speed. So just moving your fingers up and down, as opposed to backwards and forwards, is a much better way to do things. Now, of course, that feels pretty awkward at first, so that's where the practice part comes in. A great practice for this is simply pick any 4 notes, play them one after another, play them backwards, do them on different strings. So sometimes in our actual lessons we spend a lot of time doing scales. Remember the major scale? Well, apart from the theoretical aspect of that and learning the notes, the other reason why I get people to do that all the time is it makes you use all of your fingers. Especially with our major scale, we often start with the middle finger, which is one that doesn't get used as much. We tend to want to use our index finger. So that's one of the reasons why I always suggest, playing a major scale. Now, the other thing for speed is keeping your fingers low to the strings. So we don't want our fingers flying off out into the air. The distance as I'm moving from note to note, the distance that my fingers are coming off here is really only maybe a centimetre, sometimes, or half an inch. Sometimes it's even less than that. Particularly as you move from a lower note to a higher note, you don't even have to lift this finger up. So as I played each note then, I just kept the fingers down. Now, it might get uncomfortable and you might have to shift, so of course you will lift the note up. Going the other way, coming from high to low, you do have to lift your fingers up. But notice, I'm still keeping them roughly stretched across about 4 frets. So that's the main thing for today. Work on keeping this hand nice and relaxed. And with this hand, make sure that you're keeping it stretched out. You're not letting it get all closed up. Make sure as you move from note to note that you only lift your fingers up off the strings the minimum amount. And also make sure you try and keep your fingers stretched out. And really, that's all there is to it. There's no trick beyond that. It's just practice. So we'll see you next time in a lesson. Bye.